Today, we're going to talk about something uncomfortable, something that many Christians don't want to hear. We're going to examine how the same toxic ideology that drove one of history's greatest evils is being replayed today under a different banner, with different victims, but with the same devastating results. The Nazis called it Lebensraum, living space, the justification for expanding German territory by displacing and exterminating those they deemed inferior. Today, we hear about the promised land, a divine mandate to settle, expand, and displace. Different words, different religion, same fundamental sin, using God or destiny to justify taking what belongs to others. And as Christians, we must name this sin, because when nationalism wraps itself in religious language, it doesn't become holy, it becomes blasphemy. Let's start with history. Lebensraum was a concept developed in Nazi ideology that claimed the German people needed more territory to survive and thrive. It wasn't just about land, it was about creating an ethnically pure state where the master race could flourish. But here's what most people don't realize. Hitler didn't invent this idea. He borrowed it directly from Western colonial powers, especially the United States. Hitler openly admired America's conquest of the West. He studied how the United States justified exterminating Native Americans and taking their land. In Mein Kampf, he explicitly compared his plans for Eastern Europe to America's Western expansion. The indigenous peoples of America were displaced, massacred, and confined to reservations, and it was all justified as manifest destiny, God's will, divine providence. The idea that white Christian civilization had a right, even a duty, to occupy the land. The same pattern played out in Canada, where Indigenous children were torn from families and put in residential schools. To kill the Indian, save the man. In Australia, Aboriginal peoples were hunted, displaced, and their children stolen in what's now recognized as genocide. And in all these cases, Christianity was weaponized to justify it. Colonizers claimed they were bringing civilization, bringing God, bringing progress, all while committing ethnic cleansing. So when the Nazis implemented Lebensraum, they weren't creating something new. They were copying a playbook that Western powers had used for centuries. The difference? They did it in Europe to white people, and they did it with industrial efficiency. That's what made the world finally pay attention. Now, I want to be absolutely clear. I am not saying Israel is Nazi Germany. The Holocaust was a unique historical atrocity, systematic industrial genocide. But we can and must examine the ideological frameworks that enable ethnic cleansing wherever they appear, whether in 1890s America, 1940s Europe, or 2020s Palestine. Now let's talk about the concept of the promised land. In the Bible, God promises Abraham and his descendants the land of Canaan. For centuries, Jewish people have held this as a sacred inheritance, a homeland promised by God. And after centuries of persecution, diaspora, and ultimately the Holocaust, the desire for a safe homeland is deeply understandable. But here's where theology becomes dangerous. When ancient texts are used to justify modern political violence. This isn't new. It's the same theological framework used to justify colonialism for centuries. When European colonizers arrived in the Americas, they called it the New World, even though millions of people already lived there. They claimed indigenous peoples were savages without souls, living on land they weren't capable of properly using, and many sincerely believed God wanted them to take it. They called it manifest destiny. The Doctrine of Discovery, a series of papal bulls from the 1400s, literally gave Christian nations permission to claim lands inhabited by non-Christians. This theological framework justified genocide from the Americas to Africa to Australia. Today, Christian Zionism, a belief held by millions of American evangelicals, teaches that modern Israel has a divine right to all the land from the Mediterranean to the Jordan River, not because of international law, not because of negotiation or peace, but because God said so 3,000 years ago. Let me read you what some prominent Christian leaders have said. Pastor John Hagee, Israel has a biblical right to the land of Israel. It is not occupied territory. It is their land. Televangelist Pat Robertson called Palestinians terrorists and said giving up land would be disobeying God. This isn't fringe thinking. Polls show that over 80% of white evangelical Christians believe Israel has a biblical right to the land, regardless of who lives there now. And here's the problem. When you believe God gave you the land, The people already living there become obstacles to divine will, not neighbors, not fellow human beings made in God's image, obstacles. It's the same logic that allowed colonizers to slaughter indigenous peoples for centuries. It's the same logic that allowed Hitler to plan Lebensraum. And it's the same logic driving displacement and ethnic cleansing in Palestine today. So let's examine the parallels. Not to equate, but to warn, because the patterns of ethnic cleansing don't change much. Only the justifications do. The Nazis called Jews Untermenschen, subhuman. Today, Israeli officials have described Palestinians in similar terms. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant called Palestinians human animals, while announcing the total siege of Gaza. Member of Knesset Ariel Kalner said, "There is one goal, Nakba, a Nakba that will overshadow the Nakba of 1948. The Heritage Minister Amishai Eliyahu suggested dropping a nuclear bomb on Gaza. These aren't random citizens. These are government officials. And in American churches, Palestinians are often portrayed not as people, but as obstacles to prophecy. They're terrorists, Islamists, enemies of God's plan. Their children don't count. Their lives don't matter, because they're in the way of what God promised. This is the same dehumanizing language that makes atrocity possible. When you stop seeing people as people, you can justify anything. In Nazi Germany, Jewish homes and businesses were confiscated under the excuse of Aryanization. Families lost everything. In Israel and the occupied territories, over 750,000 Palestinians were expelled from their homes during the Nakba in 1948. Their villages were destroyed. Their land was taken. And Israeli law prevents them from ever returning, even while granting automatic citizenship to any Jewish person anywhere in the world. Today, this continues. In the West Bank, Israeli settlers, often backed by the military, force Palestinians out of homes their families have owned for generations.
Jacob, you know this is not your house.
Yes, but if I go, you don't go back. So what's the problem? What are you yelling at me? I didn't do this.
You are stealing my house.
And if I don't steal it, someone else is going to steal it.
No one is allowed to steal it, يا عمي.
Homes are demolished to make way for settlements that are illegal, even under international law. When Palestinians try to build on their own land, permits are denied, but settlements expand daily. There's even a religious justification for it. Some settlers cite the Bible, claiming God gave them this specific hilltop, this valley, this olive grove, and so Palestinian families are removed, sometimes violently, because a religious text written millennia ago is treated as a modern property deed. The Nazis forced Jews into ghettos, walled sections of cities where they could be controlled, monitored, and slowly starved. Gaza was often called the world's largest open-air prison before the current Gaza war. Over 2 million people were trapped in 140 square miles. They cannot leave by land, sea, or air without Israeli permission. Israel controls what food enters, how much electricity they receive, whether they can access clean water, who can leave for medical treatment. Human rights organizations, including Israeli ones, have called it a ghetto. They've called it apartheid. Before October 7th, 2023, Gazans had lived under blockade for 17 years. This isn't security. This is collective punishment, and it mirrors the logic of ghettos. Concentrate a population, control their resources, and justify it as necessary for the safety of the dominant group. And here's the final parallel: the claim that there's no choice. The Nazis said they had to act. Germany was threatened. Jews were a danger. It was us or them. Today, we hear the same language. Israel has a right to defend itself. And yes, no nation should endure terrorism. October 7th was horrific, but the response, killing over 60,000 people, most of them women and children, destroying hospitals, schools, refugee camps. That's not defense. That's annihilation and genocide. And in the name of security, nearly every atrocity can be justified. But listen to what Jesus said. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Matthew 5:9. Not blessed are those who eliminate their enemies. Not blessed are the conquerors, Blessed are the peacemakers. So what do we do as Christians? First, we reject Christian nationalism wherever it appears, whether it's the Third Reich claiming God's favor or modern states claiming divine mandates to displace and kill. God is not a real estate agent. The Bible is not a weapon, and Jesus never told us to kill in his name. Second, we recognize the image of God in every person. Palestinian children are made in God's image just as much as Israeli children. There is no hierarchy of human worth. When we weep for one and cheer for the destruction of the other, we betray the gospel. Third, we speak truth, even when it costs us. Even when fellow Christians call us anti-Semitic for criticizing a government. Criticizing Israel is not hating Jewish people. In fact, many of the strongest voices against the occupation are Jewish themselves, rabbis, scholars, human rights activists who refuse to let their faith be weaponized. Fourth, we demand our leaders stop funding this. The United States gives Israel nearly $4 billion per year in military aid, and from October 7th, we have $30 billion for this genocide. Our tax dollars fund the bombs that fall on innocent Palestinians. We are complicit, and we must demand it stops. The pattern is clear. Whenever we use God to justify taking land, killing people, or building empires, we are not following God. We are following the same demonic ideology that has caused suffering for centuries. So, let's break the cycle. Let's stand with the oppressed, whether they're Native Americans on reservations, or Palestinians in refugee camps, or anyone else crushed by the machinery of Christian nationalism. Let's refuse to let our faith be hijacked to justify evil, no matter what flag it's wrapped in, no matter how many Bible verses are quoted, no matter how many centuries it's been normalized. Thanks for watching. If this video challenged you, share it. If it angered you, comment below. Let's talk, because silence in the face of injustice is not neutrality, it's complicity. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more content like this.